If you heard there was a painting that could cause psychotic breaks if you looked at it, could you resist taking a peek? Welcome to the Frail Blaze. Cell 11. Yes, I was arrested. It's been at least 5 years since I served my debt to society and tried to live a normal life. Don't think I'm trying to make excuses and repeat a well-known cliché, but I really had a rough childhood. I lost my father in a work accident, and shortly after my mother succumbed to alcoholism. If I wanted to eat, I had to learn to beg or steal. So, it wasn't hard to get involved in more serious things, dangerous groups, and bad influences. That's the recipe for ending up in jail at 21. Even though I had some run-ins with the police and even spent a night or two at a local precinct cell, nothing prepared me for what I would face behind bars. I got there and I felt weak, like the kid that I was. Just a child who'd barely left diapers and already thought he ruled the block. There were many internal rules there, and you'd be surprised how respectful men who broke the law could be with each other. There were certain ethical norms, and in cases of disrespect, the court came into play. The court was formed by Francis, the boss of a faction, and some of his trusted men. They judged some issues and decided punishments. Punishments which could range from doing the laundry for the guy you offended for the week to something heavier. The guards didn't even bother, actually. It seemed to work well and saved them the trouble, and in return, Francis and his buddies received some perks, like cigarettes and chocolates. Some of the most notable rules in jail were: never cut in line in the cafeteria, don't touch others' things without permission, and don't respect other inmates' visits. All of this seemed normal and reasonable, but there was one specific rule that bothered me. Never look at the painting on the wall of Cell 11. I remember hearing some murmurs down the corridor from time to time, but the first time I understood the issue was on the night when old Munford was telling his stories. Old Munford was a card-carrying swindler, used to deceive people with a mask of senility, and, as you might expect, prison was a goldmine for him, where his skills of smooth talk and diplomacy fit well, along with, of course, an excellent talent for storytelling to pass the nights when it was too hot to sleep early. That particular night, the conversation revolved around the unwritten rules of prison, and that's when Munford mentioned the mysterious rule of Cell 11. "Listen up, lads," he said, with a tone of seriousness that grabbed everyone's attention. "In Cell 11, there's a painting on the wall, and there's a very clear rule about it. Never, under any circumstances, look directly at it." The murmurs spread throughout the circle of inmates. It was painted by a guy who passed through here a long time ago for killing his own mother. He was locked up in solitary confinement in Cell 11, and during a psychotic episode, he used something that no one really knows what it is to paint the eye. They say that since then, strange things happen to those who defy this rule, from terrible nightmares to all-out disappearances. "All right, old man, enough scaring the ladies," Francis's voice interrupted, and I swear I could see some inmates jump in fright. Some colleagues nervously laughed, trying to dissipate the heavy atmosphere that had settled. I, on the other hand, couldn't shake those words from my head. The painting in Cell 11, the psychotic murderer, the stories of nightmares and disappearances, all of it intrigued me in a way that I hadn't expected. That night, lying in my own cell, the thought of the painting haunted me. I couldn't shake the feeling that something sinister loomed over that macabre art. Days passed, and I did my best to avoid any mention of Cell 11, even though I thought about it all the time. It was a kind of obsession mixed with fear and apprehension. I longed to know more, but I didn't have the courage to ask. However, fate, or perhaps my own impudence, decided to play with me. I was playing basketball on one of the sports nights we had at the yard when Bob, a big, tall guy, threw himself against me to prevent a basket I was about to make. I felt my body collide with Bob's, and for a moment, air seemed to have been sucked out of the room. I found myself awkwardly falling to the ground, the sounds of my body hitting the concrete echoing in my mind. As I tried to catch my breath, I saw Bob's face, contorted in a mixture of anger and triumph. He knew he had taken me down. I took a deep breath, ignoring the throbbing pain spreading through me, and struggled to get up. Bob was laughing, a guttural sound that seemed to resonate in my ears. It only fueled my irritation. I wanted to retaliate, but I knew it would only result in bigger problems. So I swallowed my very wounded pride and moved on, trying to focus on the game. But when the game ended and everyone began to disperse, I felt a heavy gaze upon me. It was Bob, staring at me with a disturbing intensity. I frowned, feeling uncomfortable with the way he was watching me. It wasn't as if I had never faced intimidating stares before, but there was something different about the way he was looking at me, something that sent shivers down my spine. I tried to ignore him and move on, but his presence hung over me like a shadow. As I walked away from the court, I felt a chill run down my spine. I decided to head back to my cell, hoping to find some peace and quiet in there, but upon arrival, I was met with an unpleasant surprise. The guard responsible for the corridor, Tully, was standing in front of cell 11, with the door open and staring inside, mouth agape. "Hey, Tully," I asked, approaching at a safe distance. Guard Tully?" I leaned towards him. Suddenly, his neck jerked. His face slowly began to turn to face me. Now the moonlight caught his face very well, illuminating the pale skin that reflected like a beacon in that dark corridor. I could see now the tear streaks down his cheeks, his eyes staring at me with an irritated red hue, as if he hadn't blinked in some time. Without changing his expression, a scream poured from his throat, along with a thick strand of saliva. My legs started to tremble as I watched that surreal scene unfold before me. Part of me wanted to run away as fast as possible, but another part was paralyzed in fear and morbid curiosity. What the hell was happening to him? Tully continued to stare at me with bloodshot eyes, emanating that shrill scream that echoed through the empty prison corridors. I could feel my heart pounding irregularly in my chest as my mind tried to figure out a logical explanation for all of it. The guard then staggered towards me with a wobbly step and placed his hand on my shoulder. I felt the grip tightening. "Tully, please," I said louder, not to him, but to see if I would attract the attention of someone else who could help. He put the other hand up as well, even stronger, his face now inches from mine, allowing me to smell an acidic odor emanating from his hoarse voice. Now his nails digging into my uniform, and I could hear them entering my skin, tearing. "Stop, please." My screams attracted another guard, who intervened in the situation before things got even more out of control. It took 2 more colleagues to get him off of me, and 3 more to take him away from there. While I remained trembling and trying to process what had just happened, my whole body was tense, muscles contracted by fear and adrenaline. I couldn't get the image of Tully's face out of my mind. My mind automatically returned to the stories Munford had been telling about Cell 13 and the picture on the wall. Did that have any connection to what I'd just witnessed? Was there really something painted in there? I looked at the open door, the number 11 engraved on it. It seemed to invite me, to mess with me. I could go there and see what's inside the cell. No one would need to know, right? I found myself raising my hand without even realizing it, heading towards the door, ready to open it just a little more and see inside of the cell, when a voice echoed behind me in the corridor, calling my name. I jumped out of the trance, startled, and turned to see the nurse who was calling me to be taken to the infirmary. "These are pretty nasty injuries," she commented, examining the wounds. It was nothing." I tried to sound tough. The only thing I noticed was the surreal beauty of the woman I hadn't seen before. I saw the name Linda pinned on her badge. "I've been through much worse on the streets, Linda." "Miss Linda," she corrected, tightening the bandage knot with a hint of annoyance at the taunt. I let out a small ouch of discomfort, and I could see a small smile forming on her face. "And Tully?" I continued, trying to change the subject. He seemed strange, very strange tonight." Linda's expression instantly changed upon hearing the guard's name, her eyes darkening slightly, and a shadow of concern crossing her face. "We still don't have much information. It seemed like a psychotic episode. We had to sedate him." She shook her head, pointing to the stretcher behind me, where he now lay peacefully, in contrast to moments before. "A psychotic episode," I repeated, my voice sounding more like a whisper than I would have liked. Does that happen here often?" Linda hesitated for a moment, as if pondering what to say. "Not so often, but it happens," she finally replied, carefully choosing her words. "The environment in here can be challenging for some. Not everyone is able to handle the pressure." A guard entered, requesting the girl's services for a sick inmate. She quickly adjusted the IV in my veins and bid me farewell, saying that I would be under observation that night. That early morning in the infirmary was long and restless, as I lay on the stretcher, watching the shadows dance on the walls in the dim light of the lamp. My mind was in turmoil. The image of Tully's contorted face, his red and empty eyes, continued to haunt my thoughts. Whenever I tried to close my eyes, that memory came back, until, irritated, I decided that I would sleep one way or another. I began to ignore the thoughts and try to induce sleep, no matter how shallow. Gradually, I calmed down, clearing that terrible picture from my mind when I felt something strange. A tingling sensation took over my body. I felt my face start to warm up, and a familiar smell in the air. I could smell that acidic odor coming from Tully's mouth. Now, it's right in my nose. I started to tremble, the palms of my hands sweating as I thought it was a vivid nightmare. Oh, that was wishful thinking. I opened my eyes only for my heart to race abnormally. There, with his face almost lying on mine, with his eyes glazed and his mouth wide open in a silent scream, was Tully, standing over me. I could see the empty stretcher and the sheets on the floor. On his arm, the needle, now disconnected from the IV, dripped blood all over the floor, in a darker tone than normal. Panic took hold of me as I stared at the surreal scene before my eyes. I wanted to do something, scream for help, but it was as if I was in sleep paralysis. I wanted to get out of there as fast as possible. My throat seemed closed, as if fear had completely taken over me. Tully remained there, motionless like a statue, with those empty eyes and that mouth opened in a silent scream, blood slowly dripping from his disconnected needle, forming small dark puddles on the infirmary floor. Finally, after an eternity, I managed to gather the strength to move. With a tremendous effort, I reached for the button that called for help and pressed it with all my might. Soon the guards came running towards me, and I pointed to that flesh statue, trying to explain what had happened. They quickly took control of the situation, removing Tully from the infirmary and calling a medical team to check his condition. I still wake up occasionally, trembling, sweating, with the image of that guard staring down at me. On some warmer nights, I swear I can even smell that odor escaping from his mouth. I returned to my cell the next day, and Tully never returned to duty. They say he spent the rest of his days in a mental institution, but at the moment, considering all of my ignorance, I could only wonder one thing as I stared at those metal bars. What the hell is in cell 11? Interesting. I wonder just how good that picture on the wall is. What do you think? Let me know in the comments below. Would you be able to resist taking a peek? I do thank you for joining me. And after you subscribe, I do hope that you'll join me in the future for more Frailblaze tales.